Good afternoon and welcome to our latest Semaphore webinar, using semantic technologies to better leverage SharePoint documents. Joining me today will be Steve Ingrams, Senior Sales Engineer Manager, and Lance Thiessen, Principal Senior Sales Engineer, both from our Semaphore side of the business. Today's agenda. So we're going to look at the challenges around SharePoint and being able to kind of find the information that you need, classify that information, and really kind of apply the sort of business language to that. SharePoint isn't really built for that. And so we're going to go over the what and the why of Progress Semaphore, our knowledge management and metadata management application. We're going to talk about the SharePoint integration. And then finally, we're going to give you a demonstration of the platform live so you can see the intuitive UI and kind of how easy it is to kind of get started with this tool. And finally, we'll have a Q&A with myself, Steve, and Lance. If you've got any questions for the guys today, then look on the right-hand side of your screen. You'll see a little hand symbol. If you click that, you'll be able to ask any question that you'd like to our panel today. If we don't get through to your questions, apologies. We sometimes get quite a few on these sessions, but we will reach out to you and connect you to the right guys in the Semaphore team to answer those questions for you and kind of explore your interest. So with that short introduction out of the way, let me hand over to Steve. Steve, it's over to you.
So yes, thank you, Phil. Now it's an axiom in our industry that while unstructured data is the bulk of what an organization deals with, it's not used in decision making to the extent that it should be. And this is because the richness of unstructured data has always made it difficult to manage using conventional techniques. You can't shoehorn it easily into a relational structure. And these days, organizations cannot let a resource like this remain untapped, especially as it's the key to leveraging things like Gen AI. Now, on paper, SharePoint is a well-suited platform for managing unstructured data and content, but management is much more than storage. Unstructured data is generally not shared or reused, leading to unnecessary duplication. And IDC reports that less than half of unstructured data is leveraged for additional value. Gartner put this figure much lower. But the challenge for CIOs and CDOs is that the techniques that have worked fine for many, many years are not suitable for exploiting this new asset. But this is the problem that Semaphore was designed to solve. Originally released by SmartLogic in 2006, Semaphore became a Progress product with the acquisition of MarkLogic in 2023. Now, since Semaphore was launched in 2006, we have had many joint customers with MarkLogic, leading to a formal partnership in 2014 and the acquisition, obviously, of SmartLogic by MarkLogic in 2021. And the Semaphore cloud offering has been built on top of MarkLogic since it was launched in 2016. But what does Semaphore do? Now, there are three main things that Semaphore does. There is the management of implicit knowledge. There is the use of that knowledge combined with a NLP engine to provide a rich layer of metadata over unstructured data assets. And there is the use of those knowledge models to streamline and make efficient business processes. And it's the enrichment of unstructured data that's the key to the benefits of Semaphore. And here's an illustration. This comes from the medical world. And on the left is raw text. This is what's referred to as an adverse event report. These need to be submitted whenever a patient experiences an adverse event, something wrong while they're taking drugs, either as part of a trial or in normal life. And this data can be fully unstructured. So there's no definition for how this is formatted, but there will be common pieces of information in here. There will be patient age, patient ethnicity information, there will be the drugs they're taking, and indeed there will be the adverse event that they experienced. But obviously this sort of stream of text is not very useful if you actually want to exploit it, or you want to look for analytics, for example, if you wanted to look at the top 3 adverse events for experienced by a patient over the age of 70. And that's where Semaphore comes in. Semaphore's semantic platform can provide a rich layer of metadata to accompany this adverse event report so that downstream processing doesn't need to make sense of the text. We've already done that for them. And we're presenting this rich layer of metadata that's reliable and indeed harmonized. And so this content can be used downstream. Now, effectively, this content becomes self-describing. It becomes intelligent content. And intelligent content, it harmonizes the data. You can actually the data is describing itself. It can be used by different teams. It can be used across the organization. And this really is all about placing data into context. Now, Semaphore can and is used right across industry verticals. Basically, any organization using text can benefit from Semaphore. And as you can imagine, applications across all these industries are many and varied, but there are some standard patterns. All Semaphore deployments will include at least one of these. A use pattern is common theme across Semaphore deployments. They are not use cases until you bind them to an industry vertical and into business process, but they define general uses of Semaphore in different applications. And the 4 most important ones for considering when we're looking at SharePoint integration are as follows. So there's the intelligent management of records using additional metadata to improve the handling for potentially sensitive documents, for example. There is the enrichment of documents to enhance search and discovery, so making content more easy to find, routing it to the right audience. There's the use of the enriched metadata for workflow, and also enabling better decisions from data that is surfaced in unstructured content. Now, the common factor is the application of metadata, but importantly, it's metadata that's based on an understanding of the content that is being processed. And where does this understanding come from? The key is the leveraging of institutional knowledge in what we call knowledge models. All organizations have knowledge models, they just don't call them that. They may be referred to as taxonomies, or ontologies, controlled vocabularies, and business glossaries. And Semaphore simplifies the process of codifying that knowledge into a reusable form. How do we use that? Well, we use that knowledge in one of 2 ways. We want to apply that knowledge to our data, and we can do it in 1 or 2 ways. We can use it to categorize or tag data so that it can be easily found and reused. We call this semantic classification, or aboutness for short. And we can also use them to guide the extraction of key data points from an unstructured or semi-structured document. And Semaphore it's all about empowering subject matter experts, allowing their knowledge to be applied across all assets in an organization, across multiple teams and business units. An effective use of unstructured data is in combining the explicit knowledge, what's in your documents, what's in your unstructured data, with implicit knowledge, what's in people's heads. Now let's see how that can be applied to SharePoint. There are 3 main components to Semaphore. We have the central piece, the model management, the collaborative management of the institutional knowledge within your organization. And to the left and right, the transactional components that actually put that to use. On the right-hand side, we have the classification and language service. This is the piece that actually does the enrichment of text using the NLP engine and using the knowledge in the knowledge models. On the left-hand side is the semantic integration service. And this is provides vocabulary services to your organization, allows you to search and browse and retrieve information from the knowledge models. And these components are all accessible through APIs and typically deploy as part of a semantic AI middleware and use generally in combination by search analytics and document and content management systems. Now, the Semaphore integration pack, as its name suggests, integrates these components of SharePoint in whatever form it takes. Whether that is all on premise, or Semaphore running in the Progress Data Cloud, talking to SharePoint on premise. If you're dealing with SharePoint Online, then you have to have components running in the Progress Data Cloud because there is a trusted relationship between SharePoint Online and the PDC. But you can run in hybrid mode. Some organizations are uncomfortable with placing their IP in the form of knowledge models into the cloud. So in this situation, the knowledge management piece, the knowledge model manager, can sit on premise, happily talking to the classification language service, which is running in the cloud, enriching content held in SharePoint Online. So anyway, any deployment pattern you have for SharePoint, Semaphore can support that. But what does this look like from the SharePoint user's perspective? So what you end up with is sites, collections, libraries, which are holding documents, and those documents have been enriched with metadata from Semaphore. That could be semantic classification, or it can be extracted content. Now, from SharePoint's perspective, there's nothing special about data provided by Semaphore. We will populate SharePoint columns, and if those are managed metadata columns, we can integrate with the SharePoint term store. And from that point onwards, the metadata provided by Semaphore is no different from other SharePoint metadata. It can be provided for enabling search. It can be enabling workflow, document refinement in exactly the same manner as any other metadata within SharePoint. And Lance, over to you for the demonstration.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Let's go ahead and jump right into the demo. So today we're going to talk about SharePoint Online multi-language contracts. We'll look at a number of contracts that are, they have funky names. They're hard to identify by looking at them in SharePoint. You don't have a really good understanding of what kind of contract or what the document is about. So we're going to drop a number of those contracts right into SharePoint Online, and they're going to auto tag with the type of contract it is, which can be really beneficial in a lot of business opportunities, not just, or challenges, not just with legal world, but any kind of document. It would be helpful to know what the document's about or what kind of type of document it is. So we'll demo that, and then we'll take a closer look at the document, one of those contracts in our tool called the Document Analyzer, which we will auto tag it, but just one document, and we'll see exactly how Semaphore auto tags those contracts or that particular contract. And then finally, we'll go into Semaphore's knowledge model management module, and we'll look at the knowledge model that we use to identify the contract that we auto tagged. So you'll be able to connect the dots from the knowledge graph back to the classification to what happened in SharePoint. Okay. So what we're looking at here is just a basic SharePoint Online screen. This is, like other CMSs, we used it to store documents such as contracts. And if you notice, these contracts that are being stored here have names that are pretty much useless for identification. Might have somebody's name or a vendor or whoever's on the other side or the two parties, whatever, maybe a version or a date, things like that. Not really helpful. And then over here, we have two other columns that are managed by SharePoint, modified date and modified by. Good metadata, system level stuff. That's what we used to use back in the day to try to help identify what documents were about. But then we have these two columns here that are what we call Semaphore intelligent columns that are managed by Semaphore. And what happens is when you drop a document into SharePoint Online, it will make a call back to Semaphore's classification service, and it'll then auto tag it with with tags that they think it might be about, the document might be about. And then I did the same thing over here, looking for certain clauses in a contract. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. So imagine, a fire drill of this nature. The CEO calls the legal department and says, I need to know all the listing agreements we have in the company because we're changing some kind of policy or legal approach, and I need them by Monday. And you have now, 48 hours to identify your listing agreements in thousands of documents that are shared in SharePoint Online. And if you do a search, it's only going to come back with the name or maybe some modified data. It won't have the aboutness of the document based on what's in the content of the document. But Semaphore allows you to do that. It allows you to auto tag the document based on the content that's in there. So I have a handful of contracts here, sample contracts, and we're going to drop some of those in there and see how they're classified. Let's try last one again, and there we go. So I'm going to drop those guys in there. Get this window out of the way. So you can see it's uploading the 7 documents to SharePoint Online. You can see them popping in there. They haven't filled in the contract type and clause type, because what's happening is it's making calls to the Semaphore classification service to figure out the tags. And you can see the tags are already popping in. And I also, for fun, I took this document and I translated it into Indonesian and Chinese in their native language. And I'm hoping to get the tags in their native language as well when it's all done here. So let's do a refresh and see if we can speed up the process a little bit. Yeah, we got a bunch more in here. We'll focus on the ones that are in. It is a listing agreement here. These 3 documents, you can see listing agreement is one of the tags. That's listing agreement in Indonesian, and this is listing agreement in Chinese. You're going to have to take my word on that. If I get these other guys, we should have the rest in. Now they're still working, but you guys get the gist of it. It's still making the calls, but I wanted to make sure you see that it is putting those tags in there. So what I'll do now is we'll drill down a little deeper into what's going on here, because I know at this point it can be a little confusing as to how we ascertained the type of document it is just by dropping it in there and basing it on the content. So we have this tool called the Document Analyzer. It's part of the Semaphore classification module, and it's usually used by QA developers, demos. It's a one-to-one evaluation of a document. In real life, you would have another system like SharePoint calling classification service in the background, and sending potentially hundreds and thousands of documents at the same time. This is just going to analyze one document and to see exactly how it's classifying. And this can be used for development, because you can see, oh, it's tagging this way, that's correct, or it's tagging this way, it's incorrect, and I need to update my model to better to get a better result. So here's a document that we were looking at earlier in SharePoint, the listing agreement. I'm going to open it up and take a quick look at it, show you what we're working with here. It's just a sample listing agreement. And the one thing that I did is I scrubbed out the string listing agreement. So listing does appear in here in places, and agreement appears in here, but the string listing agreement has 0 results. So it does not show up in this document. There's nothing up my sleeve here. And let's go ahead and drop that guy in Document Analyzer. So I have it looking for a single article, which means I'm just looking for the aboutness on the single document. If I had a larger document, I could say multi, and it could look for multiple topics inside of a document. I'm going to do English, and I'm going to have 90 as my threshold, which is a really high score. A 100 or a 1 is a perfect score. So I want to nail down exactly what I'm looking for here. So I'll send that document for classification. And what I want to happen is I want it to come back with a listing agreement as the result. And boom, there it is right there, a listing agreement with a nice strong score of 1. It's a perfect score. A lot of folks ask me at this point, how are you able to ascertain that this is a listing agreement without the string listing agreement showing up in the content? Well, if I click this button, I can see how. It now tells me what evidence that's in the knowledge model, which I'm going to show you in a minute, is used to ascertain listing agreement. So we see this concept of exclusive right to sell, the concept broker, real property, listing period, listing price, commission, listing period, I already said that one. Governing law is another one. Yeah, that covers most of them. So it found this evidence in the document that relates to a listing agreement. So even though the string listing agreement didn't show up, I found out that it was about listing agreement by finding these concepts. So that's showing how it's doing the classification. So to connect the dots, let's go into the final module, the knowledge model management. This is where we do the knowledge graph or the knowledge model building and maintenance. And this is where the taxonomies, ontologies, vocabularies all are developed and managed. So you see I have this term here, this concept here called listing agreement. And it has a bunch of child terms in the hierarchy of it, which is basically describing what listing agreement is about. So we have some terms here like broker, closing costs, commission, exclusive right to sell, listing period, listing price, things like that. These are all child terms, narrowed concepts that relate to a listing agreement, the evidence that we saw back here, right? We also have what we call alt labels or alternative labels, which are basically synonyms to the listing agreement. So I have an alt label in English called listing contract. So if I had found listing contract in that document, it would have fired on listing agreement because we know those are the same thing. And then I have them in all the different languages there. And you can notice I have the Indonesian version as the preferred label and the Chinese version of the preferred label as well. And then finally, I wanted to talk about over here, we have what we call related concepts. And you can have, specific ones, customized ones that I created here, like often includes a. So it talks about clauses. So it's between a listing agreement, often includes a confidentiality clause. And that's just a relationship. And here's some other relationships. I didn't make them specific, but I just said it's related. And we saw governing law as one of those relationships used as evidence. And I can also visualize the model, or the concept, I should say, as a bubble graph here. And I can navigate the model through here as well. So if I wanted to say, it often includes a confidentiality clause, I wonder what other contracts include a confidentiality clause. So now I'm looking at the concept confidentiality clause, and I can see that they're using these types of contracts as well as listing agreement. So this is what drives that classification, and this is what is managed by your ontologist or your curator, your data scientist. They would be working in here, developing the ontologies and models in KMM, which is used for the the classification, which integrates with other products like a CMS, such as SharePoint. That's all I have for the demonstration at this point. So now I'll hand it back to Steve, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Lance. So coming up to the home stretch, let's just look at a couple of use cases. Yeah, Merck. At one time were the largest folderless deployment of SharePoint in Microsoft's history. Not sure if they still are, but definitely it's a significant resource, 2 million documents with historical data in there. And we can increase by using Semaphore to enrich that content for discovery. We can improve knowledge worker productivity, able to find the information typically in less than half the time it takes before the data was nicely tagged. An example of a process is a member-owned medical indemnity not-for-profit. And in that situation, we're actually combining with MarkLogic to enrich SharePoint data which is sort of medical case history. We're enriching it with SNOMED, ICD-10, and misadventure codes. But more importantly, we're also using intelligent records management here. So we're identifying candidate, doctors' names, patient information, candidate elements to be obfuscated, and passing those down to MarkLogic to make that process available. So they have a lot of, so this way their archive of medical information can be reused safely without falling foul of the information commissioner. So takeaways. So SharePoint, you can't get away from it. SharePoint is pretty much the definitive platform for document-centric working. But modern challenges require additional capabilities above the storage of documents. And these additional capabilities around improving workflow, improving discovery, making better decisions are exactly what Semaphore has been doing since 2006 and is trusted by very many SharePoint customers around the world. And with that, it's over to Phil for the Q&A.
Thanks, Lance. That was great. Thank you very much for that, and Steve as well. So now let's move on to the Q&A. Let's ask some of the questions that we've got here in the chat. So Lance and Steve, if you want to join us live here. Lance, I guess one of the questions here, it's kind of a fundamental question, is where can I learn more about knowledge modeling?
Thanks, Phil. Great question. We get that a lot. Yeah, knowledge modeling is a newer concept. When I first started with SmartLogic, I found some courses online that I took that were actually free. Some of like the Coursera type things that are available. We also have professional services and training available with them. We can do custom training that we focus on the areas of interest, starting with just the foundations of taxonomies and ontologies, all the way up to, auto tagging, classification, fact extraction, all that fun stuff. And then I'd also like to mention, next month in December, we're going to have another webinar where we're just going to focus solely on knowledge modeling and the knowledge model management component of Semaphore.
Yeah, no, that would be great.
Yeah,
definitely want to check out for next month. And I guess, does Semaphore work with other CMSs? I'm guessing that's content management systems.
Correct. Yeah, I'll take this one, Steve. Yeah, we showed SharePoint, but it works with pretty much any CMS you have available, or CRM we worked with. We've if it has an API, we have the ability to work with it. So we work with one called Brightspot, of course, SharePoint, and pretty much any others. It's if it has an API, we can connect to it.
Great. And Steve, I mean, what are the other use cases besides sort of identifying docs in SharePoint?
Oh, yeah, many and varied. So Semaphore is used across many industry verticals. So anyone who needs to process text, to understand text in forms, documents, records, that kind of thing, can take advantage of Semaphore. These applications sort of share characteristics that we call use patterns, and there are 7 in total. When you're talking about SharePoint, the 4 most common are sort of findability, so making sure people are routed to the right documents, securing sensitive content to make sure that people don't see things they aren't supposed to see, anything around sort of workflow, like know your customer, and then also making more better decisions. So mining documents to surface data points that can be used for BI and that kind of thing. The other one's intelligent records management. So this is where you're looking to make sensible decisions about retention or preservation based on what you're reading in the documents. Migration, another one, moving content from one place to another, make sure you move the stuff that's important, leave the stuff that's unnecessary or duplicated behind, and then sort of vocabulary harmonization. So any situation where you have two sets of audiences for the same content. For example, in a medical context, doctors use one set of terminology, patients and carers use another. And so using Semaphore, you can make sure that that content can go to both audiences when they make queries and questions.
Great. And this question, I don't know whether the person was thinking AI, but I definitely see it being applicable to the rise of AI and more companies looking at it. But can Semaphore identify sensitive data in the documents?
Yeah.
So stuff like PII and things.
Yep. So we can do it in two ways. So we can identify sort of things like names, addresses, identifying information, credit card numbers, political affiliation. So we can do that, and then make sure the audiences are they're routed for special handling, or they're protected, redacted. But we can actually take it a level further. For example, in manufacturing, some manufacturers have to apply export control to make sure that documents don't go to audiences that aren't supposed to read them. And you could have, for example, a situation where you might have component A and a component B, which both are uncontrolled, but if they're combined in a system, then that system becomes export controlled. And so if a document describes those two components independently, then there's no need to impose export control on it, and therefore incur additional cost for processing that document. Whereas you do want to protect a document that it actually describes the subsystem containing those two components. So Semaphore can go to that level of detail, to make sure that you're not wasting money protecting documents that aren't necessary.
Yeah. No, that's great. And it looks like that Semaphore, and this question's coming up here, but it really looks like Semaphore can improve your search tool or platform that you have in your business. I especially think the knowledge graphs and the connections for that, I think it's powering more and more advanced search. Is that how you see this as well?
Oh, most definitely, because Semaphore it applies a semantic understanding of the content. So you could have a document that doesn't mention, it's about a topic but doesn't mention that topic. So somebody searches for that topic, you want them to find that document, even though the keywords they might be searching for aren't in their document anywhere. And that's exactly what Semaphore brings to the equation. In fact, I think Lance demonstrated that in the demonstration.
Yeah. Yep. And besides contracts, Lance, what types of documents can be classified?
A great question. Anything with text, really. Any Word documents, emails, chat, scanned images would work if you OCR them first. PDFs work great. But again, anything with text. You can even send a URL to it, and it'll take the text on the website and classify that.
Yeah. And Steve, how long does it take to I think this is like a perennial question for people. It's like, oh, this seems like a lot of work. How long does it actually take to build these knowledge models, especially using a tool like Semaphore?
Good question. So the first thing is it's an iterative process, but you can start almost immediately. I mean, the knowledge already exists. It probably isn't referred to as a knowledge model. It might be sometimes it's referred to as a taxonomy and ontology, but it's otherwise referred to as a business glossary, or vocabulary, or it's just a set of definitions in a spreadsheet. So the first once you find that definition, we have wizards inside Semaphore. We can import that into what then becomes a knowledge model, because that knowledge becomes centralized and becomes shareable. So you could start from a spreadsheet of definitions. You could use third-party or industry taxonomies, and we also partner with an organization called WAND, and that's what they do. They provide foundation taxonomies across a whole stack of industry verticals. So there are plenty of ways of getting started, but the important thing is that the knowledge is pretty much already in your organizations. And the only thing I would say about it is don't try and boil the ocean. Don't try and say, I've got one taxonomy to rule them all. focus on areas that deliver the value. So is there a particular business function that requires a lot of text processing? So focus your definitions on that to start with. Maybe, you know, if you need to harmonize vocabularies, remove ambiguous terms. I mean, my favorite illustration is the word gas. You know, it's fine if you're purely an American audience because that's what you put in the car. Everybody else, it's a completely different word. So harmonizing the vocabulary, decide what you mean by certain key terms in certain key areas, and then iteratively build it out from there.
Yeah, it's like kind of codifying the language of your business, really, isn't it? It's kind of, you know, putting that across all of your data, not just like a subset. And you know, and to get started with that, like we mentioned earlier, Lance's upcoming webinar in September, which you can find on progress.com/webinars. You can register there. Definitely recommend that, because that will give you an intro to how to get started. And you know, if customers want to trial Semaphore, Steve, you know, what's the best way about going to do that? Like, where can we go? What can we do?
Yeah, so you can sign up to it's a website. It used to be called trial.smartlogic.com. Using LinkedIn credentials, that will still redirect to the right site. That gives you a 30-day trial of Semaphore. It's pretty much functionally complete. So everything you can do with Semaphore, you can pretty much do on that site. You can upload models. You can submit them for classification. It'll be, you know, fairly naive classification usually, but you know, you can actually see how the process works and where the refinement can happen. And so that's available. We can undertake more detailed trials. Those require a formal trial agreement. So we, you know, actually put effort into defining what are the success criteria, what is the scope, what are the milestones, and there's a sort of formal agreement. So that's why we have the trial site available, because that doesn't require paperwork and legal to get involved. But we can support, you know, absolutely support trials of Semaphore, because Semaphore is all about solving business problems. You do really need to see it in many ways in a relatable context.
Yeah, and I you know, and the UI is intuitive, and I can understand what I'm seeing and what happens when I do things. But it's great to kind of dive deeper into that for yourself and start using that tool. I correct myself, because I think I said September. I don't know why. I think I might have passed out for a bit, but it's December. It's December. We're not going back in time. We're going forwards. So there you go. And you know, speaking of like learning and doing that software, does Progress have like training and like professional services available to kind of support not just the training, but also then the development and the deployment of Semaphore in the business? Lance?
Yeah, I'll jump on that one since I've been quiet for a couple minutes. Yes, we do. We provide training. I talked to a little bit earlier. We have a course that we run a couple times a year that's available to anyone who wants to take it. And then we also have professional services led customized training that'll focus on what you're looking for. We also, the professional services team will help you get started, build your models out, you know, teach you how to do it. They'll actually do the modeling if you so desire, but it's usually our preference to teach you how to fish and get you working in the model so that you can, you know, be a self-service shop when it comes to your model management.
We're all tripping over our words.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, and thank you for cleaning it up. The webinar will be in December, and I want to touch back to like what we'll talk about. It is about model design and what a knowledge model is. But going back a couple questions, Semaphore can help enrich your model and build your models. Once you get you started with the WAN model, the industry model, or models that you built just from your own data, Semaphore has a number of tools that help build that out, such as a text miner where you drop documents in there and it can give you suggestions for terms in your model. We have a new tool that it's called the AI Model Builder that will use the LLM of your choice. It could be internal or it could be public. Probably better if it's internal. That you can help build your models out, and we will definitely demonstrate that in December as well. And then, of course, you can use ChatGPT or an LLM, I should say, to build import files. And that's how I built the model that I demonstrated, just by asking questions of ChatGPT in the public sector, or the public version of it, and just asking questions like, give me terms associated with a listing agreement. And that's how I was able to import those terms into Semaphore and make it work. And it really only took me a couple hours to do it. So,
yeah, and Semaphore has a foundational place in our Progress RAG solution.
yes.
So the combination of MarkLogic, which is the combined database and search engine, it's multi-model, so it allows you to store these knowledge models in MarkLogic, and then you're able to semantically search those. In fact, you can search right across different types of searches, whether that's structured, unstructured, and so forth. But really, what the value is from a Semaphore perspective is you're providing context in that knowledge graph. You're contextualizing the business. Like I say, you're applying your business language to your data, and so you're really giving the AI the best chance to find the right information and also deliver the right answer to the end user. And in fact, as a part of that process, we also then verify and check that the answer that the LLM is given, because we once again refer to that knowledge model and look for the information. So yeah, Semaphore definitely has a place in that, and it provides a lot of value to those solutions. So yeah, really interesting to see. And last question, can Semaphore classify video and audio?
So finishing on a bit of a downer, sadly, no. If there's Semaphore is very, very strong on text. So if there's an audio or a video transcription, then absolutely we can and do work on that. But Semaphore is primarily for understanding, electronic text rather than images or pictures, sound.
Yeah, there's that. I mean, that's that multimodal sort of Gen AI rather than sort of a dedicated LLM sort of play in that world. But yeah, I mean, I've used the taken the transcripts from videos and used it to classify that, because it's the easiest way to actually give the information, because it's already in some sort of structure. So you can then extract that and then use Semaphore to classify it, fact extract, entity extract within there. So
and also the transcription gives you the context. So when you talked about Semaphore with the Microsoft, MarkLogic RAG solution, you can, when we classify a document, we can identify the bits of the document. Sorry, when I say document, any text, we can identify the bits of the text that actually contributed towards that classification. So we can then, rather than take the entire document and throw it at an LLM, we can just take the bits of the document and throw it at the LLM, which you can do, if you're looking at a recording, it's very easy just to we can just grab the text and throw it at the LLM, throw the bits that are important.
And that's another sort of benefit of there, is you're actually providing the LLM with that contextual information in a concise form. Using tokens, sending more data to the LLM costs a lot of money. And so, being able to reduce your token usage by providing it concise but accurate information that's related to the concept that's in the query will save you an awful lot of money in the long run. You don't have to send. I mean, I did one transcription; it was over 40,000 words. So that's going to be an awful lot of tokens that you're sending to the LLM. Now, if the answer is just in 10, 20, 30 tokens, whatever it might be, there's no need to send all of that to the LLM for it to process. So you'll find your answers more concisely, more cost saving, and more accurate. So yeah. Well,
Phil, I have a couple scenarios that come to mind with the video, previous use cases. One was a company that hosts podcasts, and we would transcribe the podcast and then give the aboutness of the podcast so the people could search through, like I want to find content on this topic, and we were able to find it that way. And then another one, and this was really interesting, a software company was having a large multi-day, dozens of speakers event, and it was virtualized, so they were pre-recorded. So they were able to transcribe that, and give the aboutness in the catalog for the sessions, which they loved, and it was brilliant.
And I mean, one last thing just before we go, because I that sort of sparks my idea there. But also, Semaphore is multilingual.
Yes.
So by doing that, by taking those transcripts, you can actually apply different languages to that. So if the user is searching in German, or if the query is in German, then it can auto translate to English, because it's got those alternative labels against it with the languages that are already built into to Semaphore. So yeah, it's a really interesting use case.
Good point.
Great, gentlemen. Well, I think we're up to time, or we might be over slightly, but there's been some great questions. Great session today. We look forward to your next month in December, Lance, your next session. And thank you to the audience for joining us today. Thanks again, Steve and Lance, and we will speak to you soon. Cheers, guys. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.